We just like to limit your questions to one or two so that at least the persons who can answer the questions can remember what you ask and actually properly answer the questions. Thank you very much for your question, sir. Minister Gilbert.
Good evening, and thank you for your questions or your comments. With respect to the tendering process for capital projects, when these projects are funded by, say, the World Bank, as that project that you mentioned is, the tenders have to be done so that local, regional, and international companies are allowed to tender. The challenge that the local companies have, as the construction companies, is that we have companies that are so small that most times they cannot meet the criteria that is set out by the World Bank or CDB or the EU in some cases. What we need to do locally is to encourage our small companies to come together so that they can be able to compete. We cannot afford to have companies, one engineer, one architect, one contractor. We have to look at the bigger picture, and we have to do as the Chinese are doing or the Indians are doing, coming together for the common good of the country. With respect to physical planning, I must report that there has been tremendous improvement in the pace by which plans are processed by the physical planning unit. Just this week, I received the report from physical planning which indicated that between January and March, they received 168 plans, and 166 was approved. So I understand the concerns that you raised, but we are doing all that we can to ensure that we encourage persons to get involved in the construction industry and to start the buildings at the soonest opportunity after the plan would have been sent in for approval. Thank you very much.
You spoke about creating jobs and investing money. And you did mention that small business create about 50% of the employment in the country today. The question is, how are we going to keep people employed? I suspect that in the next 6 months or so, people will be laid off. My inquiries in the Ministry of Labor tells me that they have been getting inquiries of what it will cost them, small business that is, to release people. Are we thinking about some way that we can keep people employed on maybe reduced hours? Because I think if some employers do that right now, they will probably be in violation of the code. They have to let people go and then rehire them on a daily basis. Is that something that you could consider? Some formula to keep people employed? Question number one. Question number two, might this not be a good time to increase our hotel stock? And in particular, I'm talking, Mr. Prime Minister, that the government of Grenada get involved in the building of something. And right over the top of my head, I'm thinking of those 20 acres on Grand Dance Beach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to make a comment in response to Brian's first question, and that is whether adjustments can be made in the work hours and so on. Everything is on the table at this moment for discussion. The Prime Minister mentioned we are presently engaged in a multi-partite, and I say multi-partite, negotiation that is aimed at trying to conclude a multipartite social protocol that will involve government, the trade unions or the labor movement, the private sector, and civil society. The idea, of course, is to consider in this particular period what we're going to do about prices, what we're going to do about wages, what we're going to do about productivity, what we're going to do about working conditions, what are we going to do about employment, what are we going to do about income security and income support for the vulnerable in the society. All of these things are being considered at the moment. I can tell you that the negotiations have begun. What we're talking about when the Prime Minister spoke of shared sacrifices is precisely that. In order for us to go through this crisis successfully, we must unite and we must all be prepared to give something up. And already, the business community will have to be thinking, for example, can we take a smaller margin somewhere? Can we cut prices? The labor unions will be saying, for example, can we agree that there will be no increase in wages, or that instead of insisting on 40 hours a week, everybody will get 20 hours a week? Whatever the adjustments that must be made. Government has already indicated that we are prepared to put on the table several things. We are discussing, for example, at this moment, that persons who lose their jobs and are receiving a severance package, for example, that we will not tax that payment. Persons who are unemployed. And by the way, I'm not saying that we've decided that. I'm just saying, negotiations are going on. This is by way of example. But the Prime Minister will make his own announcements when that moment comes. But I'm just saying, all the things are on the table. We're talking about what concessions must people give in order to make sure that we can all ride through this together. So I want to say to you in short, that is on the table. The negotiations are on. It is the intention to have the first draft of that social protocol by Friday. And already we are expecting that by the end of by the end of April, as the Prime Minister said, something should be available for consideration by the nation. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, just before you, just a quick comment. I am talking about people that will be losing their jobs in the next 6 months. As we get to the end of the cruise ship season, people are already thinking about laying people off.
I'm talking about negotiating an agreement in the next month, so that we should be ready. We should be 5 months ahead.
Yes, good evening and thanks for the opportunity. Brian, I think I'm scheduled to have a discussion with you tomorrow sometime, so I know I'll be getting some more of the questions. With respect to the hotel stock, I think the Prime Minister in his comments said at the moment the government is engaged in negotiations with a foreign bank aimed at assisting one or more of the developers in raising concessional financing for their projects. I think the Prime Minister there was clearly referring to some of the hotel projects also. So yes, we absolutely agree with you. In this time of decline in terms of arrivals as we expect over the next couple of months, we are trying to partner with the private sector to see how we can expand our room stock. As you know, we have two major challenges in the tourism industry. One is the question of room stock, the other is airlift, and they both two sides of the same coin. So with respect to hotel stock, yes. With respect to the 20 acres on Grandad's Beach, that is an issue that the government is still considering, and we hope that at some point that matter will be resolved. Of course, as I said, several other places, it's not a matter that we are going to be discussing publicly at this moment. But yes, I agree with you entirely that we need to find a way to increase our room stock, because for a country that is dependent on tourism, we cannot continue to have, the figures vary, but I think the numbers would be between 12, 13, 14 rooms that people consider to be of the caliber that is good enough for industry. For us to move our tourism industry forward, we must ensure that our room stock is developed, because if we do not have room stock, we will not have airlift. And as